So I said before, I'd open this up for any questions you can answer. Now, on Hidabroot, I have a show called Marriage Matters. Every week I film little short videos, and we have writers from around the world write in their questions. But now is a live opportunity on Hidabroot to ask your questions, and hopefully I'll have it. I'm going to repeat your questions so people can hear them much clearly. You could ask about marriage. You could ask about teens at risk. I actually wrote a book on teens at risk called At Risk, Never Beyond Reach, which is now available on Amazon as well. I put it up recently. But I could talk about teens at risk, marriage therapy. I deal a lot with singles having shidduchim problems. I've helped a lot of singles get married, Baruch Hashem. Trauma, anything to do with post-traumatic stress disorder or various other things. So please feel free to ask any questions you have. Yeah.
I'll do the first.
Sure.
Okay, guys. Throughout my life, I went through many traumatic scenarios that I just keep thinking of that will stick to me forever.
Yeah.
I can't forget. I forgave, but I'll never forget. Is that bad? Because I hold it against them sometimes.
Right.
Because I don't talk to them so much. Like, I'm not comfortable with them. It's like really bad because it's family.
People that hurt you,
part,
and it's hard for you to forgive and to forget.
No, I forgave, but
it's hard to let go. Yeah. Well, two things I want to say about that. One is I'll give from the Torah perspective and the psychology perspective and the Torah perspective. There is a therapy for trauma, painful trauma, called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And a wonderful therapist about 33 years ago at this point, Dr. Francine Shapiro, developed a system, a grounded system in psychology where she helps people overcome post-traumatic stress or pain from the past by actually going through their trauma with them and doing something, these eye movements, left, right eye movements. It's actually turned out to be very successful for many, many people around the world. Her therapy was initially used for soldiers coming back from war. It's extensively used in Eretz Yisrael. Many people have trained in EMDR. First-degree trauma, when they first experience it, or long-term trauma. You know what post-traumatic stress disorder is. PTSD is when somebody experiences something very painful in their lives. They've been hurt by people. They've been traumatized, overwhelmed by that experience. Terrorist accident, abuse, death in the family, something very tragic like that. And the problem is, according to Francine Shapiro, we tend to repress a lot of our feelings to just survive. The human being doesn't like to feel pain for a long period of time. So what do? We repress our thoughts. We try to push them away and move on. But here's the problem. Our unconscious mind holds on to what we try to forget. It stays there forever. And she believes it's unsettled in your brain. It sits there. It never settled away. It never got on Windows, you file your files away, you put your file on your husband's or whatever. It never got filed away properly, so it's hanging out there in your unconscious mind. And that's what PTSD is. Something triggers that piece that is unresolved. You're sitting down somewhere, you're talking to somebody, you smell something, you see something, you have a deja vu, you kind of get re-triggered back to it. So she believed that you actually, until you go back to the trauma and you reorganize it with a therapist, calmly with them, a trained licensed therapist, of course, it's going to stay there. So she showed that you can actually go back, reorganize a trauma by going to it with eye movements, and it actually heals a lot of the traumatic experiences. That's one thing, would be a helpful therapy for forgetting, actually. Not just forgetting, she would call it organizing it. It doesn't bother you as much. What's that?
To relive it?
She believes you go back into the trauma with a trained therapist who's trained in EMDR, and it helps you reorganize it so it's not as painful. That would be one suggestion. The other suggestion I write about in the book is the Ramak from Moshe Cordovero. This will directly answer your question according to Torah. Wrote a book called the Tomer Devorah. Tomer Devorah, many of you probably heard of it. And the Tomer Devorah is based upon a pasuk from Micha. It just starts, Mikel Kamocha, Nosi Avon V'Avra Pesha. It's a famous pasuk that we read different times in Yom Kippur, read it. And there are 13 levels of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's Rachamim, his mercifulness, his compassion for his Bria, for his creation. and they're progressively more compassionate as you read these. It's a fantastic book. So if somebody is left with regret or anger or can't forget or can't forgive, so he brings 500 years ago a psychological system according to the Torah. By emulating how God is compassionate to the world, we need to emulate God's rachamim and forgiveness. Just as one example, imagine that Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us koach, He gives us strength, He gives us food, He gives us free will, He gives us a house, and we abuse it by breaking Shabbat, and we don't keep kosher. So Hashem, who gives us something, we look at Him, and we take what He gave us, and we throw it back at Him. But even so, it says in the Talmud Devar, Kadosh Baruch Hu forgives even people that He gives goodness to that don't give it back to Him. So we need to also learn to forgive even people that hurt us. So I'm just introducing this today. I suggest you could look at Tomer Devorah, but I've asked some of my clients over the years to consider, at least in my office, for a few seconds, experience what it would feel like for 30 seconds, even if you don't do it really, but just try to imagine it, that you forgive somebody that hurt you. Imagine now. So I'm going to give you a chance now. Think about somebody that's hurt you. And just spend a few seconds. I would contemplate forgiving them. Okay. And how much more so if you could do what the Tomer Devorah says and actually say, I forgive you to the person. I've seen it dramatically reduce depression very quickly, forgiving somebody that hurt you. So forgiveness on this level, and who could aspire to such forgiveness unless we have the Torah, which asks us to do this in the Tomer Devorah? Consider forgiving those who hurt us, and see how you feel emotionally, and see if you can let go of the resentment and be healthier. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just wanted to add to what you just said. I personally, I was hurt, and then when I decided that I was tired of feeling hurt by that person, and then I recognized that it was from Hashem and not from that person, and then I went over to that person and I said, I forgive you. I understand that you may have not meant to do it, and I understand that it's from Hashem. And I'm saying this out loud because I want to hear me say to you that I forgive you. And also, I don't want to cause, God forbid, if I feel something against you, then God forbid I'm going to cause harm to you. Because, there's, an inyan that, if a person, has something against somebody, that they could cause them harm, hakpada, something
right.
bad could happen to them.
Right.
So when I did that, I felt a tremendous load off my, I felt,
right.
I'm actually, it was a weight off my shoulders. When I went over to them, even though I was hurt and what they did I didn't like or whatever, but when I realized that it was from Hashem, and I just, I said, okay, I accept, I don't understand why this happened, and I don't know why this person was chosen to do this to me, but when I went over and I said that to them, it really, that I felt, that's it, it's over.
Right.
I just said it, and I just...
Right. Well, in other words, I'm going to repeat the question from my microphone, but you're saying that when you realized that the person that hurt you, that actually came from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that message, you felt relieved, a sense of tremendous... You did what I was talking about in the book. You went beyond yourself. You went to a higher level. You couldn't easily, from a psychological perspective, experience forgiveness. But when you went to that higher level, you ascribed to a higher value system, that there's a God, hashgacha pratit, when there's God in the world, you just key yourself into that level, you found a certain empowerment that perhaps even psychology couldn't offer you. So I'm just mentioning it's a tremendously powerful thing you did. Yeah, I'm going to repeat your question so they can hear it. Go ahead.
How do you connect this to, let's say, a young girl who was being verbally and emotionally abused by her husband? Many years passed, she remarried, she doesn't have to do with him. She can even forgive in this level that she's saying, but she still feels intimidated by his presence. Does she have to do anything with the person or not?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, as a young woman who was treated very badly by her husband, and many years later, or several years later, she still feels intimidated by him and bad in his presence? Mm-hmm.
Ex-husband.
Yeah. Well, ex-husband, I'm sorry. Well, so what exactly is the question?
she can forgive,
Yeah.
taking what she's saying.
Could she do that?
Hashem. She could,
But still.
but she doesn't want to have anything to do with the person. Does she have to?
Well, does she have to go back to the person who hurt her? You know, so what you were saying is that she could forgive somebody and even realize it's from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but could she get back to the level that she could, when you say get back to the person, do you mean...
Even a simple relationship.
Even though they're divorced years later. Well, we're not malachim. So, you know, I don't think... maybe that tzaddikim could achieve such forgiveness and look at a person compassionately. But I think we have to be reasonable. If this person, her ex-husband, was abusive or hurt her and was mean to her, I would imagine it would be very difficult, and it would be better for her to move on with her life and relate to other people more effectively. I could say, however, that this brings up the question about if somebody was abused by their parent also. If somebody's abused by somebody, you know, and I want to be very clear about this. The first thing you need to do if you're abused is protect yourself. Even if it's difficult, a difficult message for the abuser, so to speak. I am very careful with this in therapy with people. When I talk about forgiveness, when I talk about finding a higher meaning in your life, that's all very nice, but number one is, are you safe? So let me make that very clear. A person who's abused has to distance themselves from the abuser and take care of themselves. They may want to go through a process, if they have post-traumatic stress disorder, to get healing from a therapist who does EMDR to work through the post-traumatic stress they've experienced. But I don't often say that the victim should expose themselves to the perpetrator. So if that's what you're hinting at, I would caution distance and to move on to something else, and not to feel they have to feel good. I mean, it's very hard. And when I was mentioning forgiving people, I was mentioning somebody that insulted you once, who took something that they shouldn't have taken from your house and you felt bad, or somebody wasn't polite to you in shul. That's what I was talking about. But somebody was abused, I'd like to say is on a different level, has to be much more careful. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I'm a little bit confused about what Viktor Frankl says, that we must go beyond ourselves, we must help others to find a deeper sense of purpose.
Right.
The reason I'm confused is, like, I already have a natural tendency to do that. I have a natural tendency to want to help people too much, and to my own demise, not actually find my own. Is it my purpose just to help them, or what is it that I'm not hearing?
Oh, you're asking the question is it a person's purpose to just help other people to your own demise?
And I have friends that are like me,
yeah,
and we're trauma survivors, and so it's like, how do you strike that balance between doing the PTSD stuff and helping others? Oh, great question. So the question was, how do you balance out post-traumatic stress disorder from people versus helping other people too much? Well, let me introduce you to another topic or another book or philosophy or psychology that I didn't mention tonight, that of a woman named Pia Mellody. P-I-A, another word melody with two L's at the end. She wrote a book called Facing Codependence. And what you're bringing up is a bit of, codependency. It's a little beyond our lecture tonight, but let's just spend a few minutes on codependency. Many of you heard of the term codependent, I'm sure. It's a big term in American society. But Pia Mellody she's one of the people that coined the term or brought it to life in modern psychology. What is codependency? Codependency is a term which emerges from the world of addiction therapy. They started noticing many years ago from Alcoholics Anonymous and people that were dealing with a husband or a wife or a child, a spouse that had an addiction to anything, it could be drugs, alcohol, internet, whatever, that there's a tendency of their partner or their child to become codependent. Codependent would be a classic case of codependency. Would be where a wife desperately wants her husband to love her, but she knows alcohol is terrible for him. But he says, "Oh, just this once, honey. I just needed a few bucks to get a drink." She's worried he's not going to love her, so she gives him the money. That's called codependent. She's just desperate for his love, so she gives into his addiction. So, but what they found, what Pia Mellody writes about brilliantly, is that they found this exists throughout society, even without addiction. There's people that are codependent. Codependency is really coming down to the level of self-esteem. Codependency means that
that I depend on you to feel good about myself. That's codependent. I'm dependent upon you for my own self-worth, so to speak. So in the codependency movement, we try to show people how to empower themselves by working on their own self-esteem, regardless of the other person or without the other person. And I just instruct you to get this book, Facing Codependence, by Pia Melody, because I think she beautifully works out 5 core symptoms of codependency. So one has to find a balance, and the Torah talks about this balance. The Rambam, for example, talks a lot about finding balance in relationships and in all the things that we do. So he talks about finding a shvil hazahav, derech hamamutza we call in Hasidic thought, a middle pathway between extremes. So if you're, and this is Pia Melody's idea too, if you're never worried about other people, that's the opposite of being too worried about other people. So being too self-absorbed, what we call narcissistic, is very damaging. But on the other end, what's the opposite of narcissism? Too worried about other people. You just live for other people. That's called codependent. If you find yourself in any poles or extremes, you need to find a balance between the two. That's what the Rambam was talking about, Hilchot Deot. He talked about finding balance between extremes. So we all have to watch ourselves. Are we too dependent, or are we not caring at all for other people? So I think your answer would come in that realm, not specifically in Viktor Frankl. I don't think he was referring to it. I would refer you more to the codependency ideas, psychology, to help work through too much, feeling too responsible. Now, we see people getting too responsible when they've experienced trauma. That's often a symptom of people that have experienced abuse tend to be codependent. They tend to be codependent on their abuser at times. They can't break free from the abuser. They may also be too dependent on their spouse. Let's say their father abused them, and now they become too dependent on their spouse. They don't self-actualize, differentiate, as we call it, family therapy. So these problems exist in human relationships. One has to watch them and find the balance between being too self-centered or the opposite, being too so much caring that they forget themselves. The real answer exists in finding a balance between the self and the other. Other question? Yeah.
I'm not clear. Like, let's say you have big Rabbanim who are like taking care of their Kiran, and so they cared a lot about others. So I'm not clear, when is the caring for others like?
Well, I don't think a rabbi is necessarily codependent. It's a zchut to help everybody. I'm sure many rabbanim may suffer if they don't take any time for themselves. So even a rabbi needs to take a vacation, to exercise, eat well, and to take breaks. He has to make his own Shabbos, I guess, because he can't make it on Shabbos because he's working on Shabbos with the community. But people have to find, even the Rambam. I would refer to the Rambam. He talks about exercise and diet and taking care of oneself as well, and finding a balance at some point. Because if you don't nurture yourself, if you don't renew yourself, you can't help anybody else in life. So even givers, except our tzaddikim that could give and give and give, everybody else needs to find something for themselves to renew themselves to even give more.
Sounds the same as chesed, no? Like, where's the balance to chesed? Like, you have to, know where your balance is there too. It's such a similar idea.
Well, we know that
Chesed begins at home, and like you have to help others.
Right.
You have to know when.
Well, we know that chesed can be distorted, and we know that gevurah can be distorted. So, according to the Torah, the distortion of chesed is licentiousness, and the distortion of gevurah is murder. So we have to be careful not to distort. What we need is a balance between right and left, and tiferet, beauty, is the balance we find between these two poles. We have to keep them in mind. Yad yamin dochefet, small dochefet, yamin kamikarevet. So we have to find a balance, and we see that in parenting as well. We have to find these concepts of balance, emotional balance, everything between husband and wife, parent and child, parent and teacher and student, and so everything has to find a right balance between chesed and gevurah, find psychological balance. We'll take one more question. Yeah.
Going to shidduchim.
Right.
I'm gonna try to describe my question. I don't know. It's just very hard. What do you do when it's so hard?
Boy,
The question is that.
how much time do I have? I think I can answer that in another lecture. We'll give one on Shidduchim if you want. Because one of the things I deal with as a psychologist, as a family therapist, are people having difficulty getting married. And I deal with something called attachment theory, which is the study of attachment. How people find it difficult to get close to one another, how they distance from one another, and I think most of the studies would, but I would refer you to a psychologist named Sue Johnson, who wrote a book called Hold Me Tight, and I actually trained with her. She's one of the world's leading marriage therapists. And she bases her writings on this idea of something called attachment theory, created by a fellow named John Bowlby in England. It's one of the most profound theories in family therapy and extremely helpful for individuals. There's also a fantastic book that I give out to singles that are having trouble getting married. It's called Attached. Right? Attached, simply. The website is called attachedthebook.com. A fantastic read on why singles have difficulty getting attached and married. And it's a fellow named Levine, an Israeli psychiatrist who wrote the book with an American social worker. So in a short answer, on one foot, I would suggest you look into the book Attached, and perhaps in future lectures I'll address more about Shidduchim.
Is Attached the book?
Well, the website is called attachedthebook.com, but the book is something called Attached by Amir Levine. But it's a fantastic work on why singles have difficulty in the shidduch world.
Oh, and the Sue Johnson book.
Sue Johnson's book is called Hold Me Tight. It's a great book on marriage therapy based upon what she created called emotionally focused therapy, which I've been trained in, which I do with couples.
It's for girls or boys?
It's for girls and boys. But girls read it more than boys, unfortunately. The truth is the guys need the book more. The girls understand that intuitively.
Yeah.
It's the
I
guys.
feel like the girl work more on the relationship than the boys usually.
Right, women tend to have a greater intuitive sense of relationships, and men have to work on them. But they don't read the book, so.
No, I want to ask you about the book.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the book. What it's talking about specifically.
Specifically, my book is talking about the ideas of Viktor Frankl and the Torah, how to use them to achieve a greater sense of happiness. That's my entire book.
So it doesn't have subject.
I have two parts of the book.
General.
I have the books about how to overcome depression and anxiety using the ideas in the Torah and psychology of Viktor Frankl. And the second part of the book, I have a translation of Chovot Halvavot, Duties of the Heart, Shar Bitachon, the Gate of Trust. And I broke it down as a daily reader. And I asked people to study Shar Bitachon every day, a little part of it.
So whatever you said today is
Everything I said is
from the book.
in the book
I'm
and more.
sorry.
What book did you write, about marriage? There is a book.
I wrote a book called Getting Closer about marriage. I wrote a book called At Risk, Never Beyond Reach on Teens at Risk. And now I have a new book called Think It Will Be Good on positive psychology. I'm actually writing another one on marriage right now. It'll take another 2 years.
Yeah? Okay.
Another 2 years. The way to watch my videos
Yeah.
and my writings, my website is itwillbegood.com. Itwillbegood.com.
How?
Itwillbegood.com is my website. I have lots of videos and information about what I do. And I'm on Hidabroot every week.
It will be good on the book.
It's called facebook.com/thinkgoodbook.
Think Good Book. And I'm on, my book is, now, it's out of print now because we just sold it, but the book is available. By the way, I'm not here to sell my book, so I'm not promoting it. I'm just telling you, if you want to get the book, it's available on Amazon. Think Good, It Will Be Good, Daniel Schonbuch.
They have copies at Eichler's.
Eichler's Flatbush also has some copies left, so.
Yeah?
Yeah.